Hey there, it's Jason back, minor7flat5.blogspot.com. Another lesson here for those of you who have contacted me or I've been in contact with, especially my friends in California, specifically my friend Mike, who was asking some questions about scales in multiple places on the fretboard. Rather than going through all those specific patterns that you can play anywhere on the fretboard, something that was revealed to me as far as making the fretboard more accessible, which kind of goes along with the warm-up exercises I posted earlier, is just taking one specific type of scale pattern, which is the 3 notes per string pattern, and using that on kind of like one chord and its inversions. For example, if I were to play like I just played in the G, if I were to play G, I would play the 3 note per string major scale that goes along with that chord, specifically in the key of G. The next step in that is finding its first inversion, which moves you up to the 7th fret. This is keeping basically all the root notes on the low E string, just so you get the whole fretboard involved and not just playing off of the A string or the D string or just those other strings limiting you and as far as your space and how much you can use on the fretboard. But this actually keeps you on all 6 strings all the time. The thing about 3 notes per string, first off, is you don't always end on the tonic. You can end on the tonic of whatever key you're working on. Like say if I was in G, the tonic actually ends up here on the 8th fret on the B string. And that's 2 octaves, but part of the process of actually opening the fretboard up to you is not always starting and ending on the tonic, which is why we work in inversions of the chords as well as the root position of the chord. So like for that first example of 3 notes per string, I actually end on a C up here on the 8th fret on the high E string, before coming back down to the root of the chord at the 3rd fret. So if we were to do that, the complication that arises when working in these extra positions is that you end up with concerns about modes, and modes can be a bit daunting for a guitarist at times. They just kind of seem a little out of our league and a little frustrating to actually incorporate into our playing. But what this process does is it gets you aware of where the modes exist, but at the same time you're not actually thinking modally, you're thinking diatonically to the key that you're working in. So if I'm playing in G and I start on the root and I go to the next inversion of that chord up here at the 7th fret with the B in the bass, technically playing this scale, I am working out of the Phrygian mode, but for this specific purpose of working on your fretboard expansion and fretboard knowledge, we're actually thinking of it in the key of G, but playing from the 3rd, as opposed to thinking, oh, I'm playing a Phrygian mode, I must be in the key of G, but you're just working off of the second or first inversion of that chord. So those were all the notes that are basically in the key of G. What this also does is it helps reinforce what notes are available to you if you're soloing in the key of G. Starting from these different positions give you sonically a different sound to your solo approach. And while it may kind of sound modal, you're not thinking modal. You're thinking off of this key, this diatonic relationship with just the G chord. And then you do it again on the 3rd inversion, which is a little more awkward to get to. But you still use 3 notes per string to accomplish it. So again, I did just technically play a D Mixolydian mode, but for all intents and purposes of this exercise, I'm playing all the notes related to the key of G from the fifth of the G chord. The other element to this exercise is also adding in the arpeggios. As you get more familiar and comfortable with the arpeggios, you can actually use extensions. So you can start adding like the major 7, the flat 7 for a dominant chord. You can make them minor, which puts you in a different key relationship, but you can still work on getting the knowledge of, say, working from like a G minor chord, 3 notes per string. Which I basically just played a G Dorian mode, but thinking of it from the key of F, I just played all the notes in the key of F, starting from G and working out of this G minor chord. And I could do the same thing working off of the third, this being a flat third, so being a B flat up at the 6th fret. And the same thing with the D up here at the 10th fret. So those can be used in any key, off of any chord. It just depends on which key you want to actually practice in. So I mean, I could play, taking that G minor. I could play it in the key of F. I could also play in the key of B flat. I could play it in the key of E flat. And that would change the notes that are related to that key based on where you're starting. But rather than, again, reinforcing the fact that if you're thinking about it modally, try to disconnect that from what we're working with in this exercise and think about it within the key. Diatonically, just start with a major. It's a lot easier. And as you get more comfortable, you can throw in, the 7s. Which also changes the quality of the chord or the position of the chord to possibly being in the key of D if you make it a major 7. It can be the 4 chord, so you have a C sharp in there. Or in the key of G, which we've already gone over. And then working in the arpeggios. And also the arpeggios without the extension added onto them. There will be a couple of PDFs attached to this just kind of help you reinforce the keys that you're playing in, the notes that are available to you. The other thing to practice in is the key of C, which is always easiest, and part of practicing in the key of C that helps is by looking at the fretboard as a piano and trying to pick out all the white notes so you don't have any accidentals or any black notes on the piano, which is like we're starting with, say we start with G again. And playing in the key of C, the thing that we're going to remove is that F sharp, which is normally diatonic to the key of G. But if we're playing, from G in the key of C, we're playing in two thought processes at that point. We're playing from the fifth of a C chord, or if you're thinking modally or want to think modally and stretch your mind a little bit, you're playing from the Mixolydian mode in the key of C. There's that F natural. And then move up to the third. And then move up to the fifth, up at the 10th fret. Your way back down. So those are just some ways to kind of expand the fretboard as far as note awareness, where you can play specific patterns and shapes. And I like to keep it to the three note per string pattern, just because it's a little simpler to work within, because you're not worried about your fourth finger all the time, or you're not worried about whether you're playing it 100% within like a box pattern, like. Which gets your third and fourth finger a little bit of a workout, but you also end up going just tonic to tonic to tonic, G to G to G, up 2 octaves. This way gets you a little bit more linear up the fretboard, and also gets your ears tuned to not always wanting to land on the tonic. Because some of those other notes that you end up playing with the 3 notes per string pattern can color up your solo somehow. Because if you end up on a C while you're playing a G chord, you're actually suspending the third, so it's like you're playing a suspended chord, but you're causing tension within your solo that is audibly pleasing to the people listening to it, and they're not just playing, diatonically, and always thinking, I gotta land on a G, I gotta land on a G, gotta land on a G. You can land on the fifth, you can land on the third, you can land on the fourth, cause some tension, you can land on the seventh to cause some tension, you can land on the the third to cause some tension, and create new ways of soloing. The other way to reinforce this is to record yourself just playing like a G chord, whatever sort of like easy strumming pattern, or even just like letting it ring for whole notes for 4 beats without really worrying about a metronome, but using it as a reference so you can work on those. Yeah, hopefully this has been helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, or need me to re-record it because it's poor quality, or the explanations are a little less than understandable, please feel free to contact me, email, Facebook, whatever you need to do, and I'll redo it, or I'll explain something a little bit better. Again, I'll have some PDFs posted with this one, probably the 3 note per string pattern that you can use to start with, using the root, the third, and the fifth initially. And again, don't think about it as a modal practice unless you're at that ability. And if you're taking lessons or something, don't necessarily bring this to your teacher and be like, this is what I want to learn, you're not teaching me right. The only thing about a teacher that you should be aware of is whether or not he actually makes you feel encouraged, or that you're actually doing what you should be doing. If he outplays you during a lesson, you need to find a new teacher. That's not the point of teaching. The point of teaching is to reinforce the things that you're learning and to make you feel like you're actually grasping the knowledge of the guitar, because this instrument's pretty deep, deeper than a lot of people give it credit for. So if you're in one of those positions, are in one of those places where you just don't feel like you're getting there just yet, don't get frustrated, don't quit. And if your teacher is making you feel that way, find a new teacher. It's well worth the investment to find a teacher who actually will work with you and for you, as opposed to trying to show you up in lessons. I've had those teachers, and they're not very fun. So yeah, thanks. Thanks for stopping by.